Relations between Australia and Indonesia were changed forever on the night of the 2002 Bali bombing. Australia's former Foreign Minister Alexander Downer says it ushered in a golden era in our relationship with Indonesia. Here he reflects on the events of that night and how anger gave way to greater cooperation.
There was so much to do. We had to make sure that, first of all, survivors were looked after. Bali didn't have the medical facilities to do that. We had to fly quite a lot of them back to Australia. We had to provide planes to get them back to Australia. So there were a whole series of logistical issues. The families were anxious, often angry. You can just imagine going back to that time, the simply horrific publicity Indonesia was getting, and a reaction within at least some sections of the Australian community which was entirely understandable. I'm not saying I supported it, but it was understandable, of real anger towards Indonesia. I mean, killing our young people in this way. You can excuse people for being hugely upset about that, and yet the response wasn't to be angry with Indonesia, but to work with the Indonesian government to try to make sure such an event wouldn't happen again, to make sure that there was an effective response to terrorism, to Jemaah Islamiyah in particular in Indonesia, and to make sure we were able to bring, or they were able to bring to justice the people who were responsible for the Bali bombing. So anger, yes, towards the terrorists, but no, not anger towards Indonesia as such.
What was Jemaah Islamiyah's motive in targeting Australians?
I think it had a lot to do, the targets particularly important, had a lot to do with the overall strategy of Jemaah Islamiyah and Al-Qaeda, which was first and foremost to drive Western interests out of Islamic countries. And number two, having done that, because their perception is that Western interests prop up governments which are essentially fairly secular governments and therefore unacceptable to Islamic extremists, drive out Western interests, break the Western-style economic model, and the country will fall into our hands. Improbable as that may seem, that's what these people are motivated by.